in his first presentation, he kind of gave us a whirlwind tour of Hindu science because he just wanted to give us a glimpse of what it is about. And now I think in a series of lectures, we hope that Professor Kumar would tell us a little more in depth on various topics. And so, Professor Kumar, thank you very much for taking the time to enlighten us.
Namaste, Nayan Mohanji. Thank you so much for the introduction. And namaste to all viewers. I'm so delighted to share my views on this specific topic, ecology and well-being in Hindu tradition. See, I do not get many invitations to talk about Hindu science. So when I decided that I should speak on this topic, I had no slide prepared. So I had to prepare the slides. So I started preparing the slides, and I was prepare maybe 20 to 25 slides in a day. And I thought maybe it will not be enough. So I started preparing the following day and the following day. So I kept on preparing slides for 5 days in a row. And I ended up with about 125 slides, and I was not done. I could have prepared more. And then I realized that 125 slides means the lecture will be for half a day and not for 1 hour. So I knew that, I have to cut down these slides. And then I thought, it's a good kind of problem that I have. And then I thought that, how lucky I can be that I'm from a tradition, from a culture where it is so easy to talk so much about a specific topic. So I felt so good about the heritage that I have, and I started, cutting these slides one by one. And when I was doing it, I noticed that I am humming a song. And the song is, Sare Jahan Se Acha, Hindustan Hamara, that's in Hindi. So I was humming that song, and those who do not know Hindi, basically I should tell them that that means that Hindi is better than the whole world. It's a patriotic song and very popular in India. Now, in that song, there are a few sentences that I want to talk about, and that will be the starting point of my lecture. In that song, it says, Yunan Misr Roma sab mit gaye jahan se, ab tak magar hai baki, नामो निशा हमारा. कुछ बात है कि हस्ती मिटती नहीं हमारी, सदियों रहा है दुश्मन दौरे जवां हमारा. So let me, those who do not know Hindi, let me explain the meaning of that in English. That Greece and Rome and Egypt, they have lost their glory. They were a great civilization at one time. But in India, we are still standing. And there is something about our existence, for it does not get wiped out. Hindu or Indian civilization, it is so old, and despite atrocities that we have faced, we have survived. So what is the secret behind it? Why? When Greece and Egypt and Rome, they lost their glory, although they were not subjugated by other civilizations. In India, we have survived and survived well. So I thought this is something I should, talk about. So that's what I'm going to do initially. And then I'm going to talk about the ecology, which is the topic. I hope you have read this book, Fahrenheit 451. It's a book by Ray Bradbury, written in 1953, and it's a science fiction novel. And there are two films, Hollywood films, that were made on this book. This author, I think he published only 2 books, and he made so much of money from these 2 books that basically he retired. And this Fahrenheit 451 is basically is the temperature at which paper catches fire. The book is about a futuristic society where they decided that they do not want knowledge, and therefore books became outlawed. And the role of the fire brigade was to burn books. And a small group of people countered the situation by memorizing book. And this is not something that is so fictional, because it did happen in not only in India, but in many cultures. For example, the Alexandrian library was burned. It was burned 3 times. And after the 3rd burning, it was completely destroyed. And the end result was a scholar moved away from Egypt, and Egypt lost its glory. Same thing happened in China. During the Qin dynasty, they decided to burn books because the king decided that the scholars, they are too much involved with their books and they don't respect the king. So he decided to burn the book, and China lost its glory. Same thing happened in Baghdad. When Hulagu Khan burned Baghdad, Baghdad lost its glory. And recently it happened in Spain, where it was decided to burn books, and Spain lost its glory and its status in science and technology. So this has happened many times. In contrast, Hindu libraries burn on a regular basis for hundreds of years, for many centuries. Libraries in Nalanda, Vikramshila, Mathura, and so on, these were burned. But when these libraries burned, they were reproduced. And that is, a remarkable story that I want to share about just for a few minutes before I go to ecology. Culture, religion, these are really very fragile, and we should not take these for granted. For example, if you know the history of religions in the world, a large number of religions, they came and disappeared. We don't even know their names. And most of the religions that we have are very young religion, like Islam, Christianity, Sikhism, and so on. Cultures and religions, they are very fragile. All we need is, if one generation is not retaining the knowledge of the previous generation and passing it to the next generation, only in a few generations that knowledge will disappear forever. And this is what happens. So it's a sacred duty of every generation to retain, to assimilate the knowledge of the previous generations, and then pass it to the next generation. I mean, when we are talking about generation, and when we are talking about, cultures and civilizations, maybe some of us, will have a difficult time to understand. But let me give you an example that perhaps will explain this issue. I mean, when we think about our parents, particularly mother, one close relationship that we have is through food, the food that she cooks. And, we love to eat those. Now, mother is not going to be there forever. One day she passes. And then if we do not learn those recipes, we only keep thinking about those recipes. But the time has passed. Those recipes can never be reproduced. So it is a duty of every generation to pass their knowledge to the following generation. In fact, that's what I'm trying to do right now. I'm just sharing my knowledge so that the knowledge can be preserved. And Hindus did a superb job at that, because the Hindu culture was not a written culture. It was a oral culture. That's so remarkable about Hindu culture. Now, I mean, most teachers, they know that the most difficult part in teaching is that you teach something that the students can retain 5 days from now or 5 years from now. So retention of information is the most difficult issue in teaching. How do we memorize? Well, Hindus thought about it, and they did something truly remarkable. First, we memorize through association. There is no doubt about it. And in that, rhythm or pattern, they play a very important role, and therefore poetry is much easier to memorize than prose. And this is what the Hindus did. They composed their literature, even the scientific literature, in poetry. And that played a very important role in the preservation of their religion and culture. And the beauty there is Sanskrit language, is very rich. It has words, several words that has one meaning, and one word that has several meanings. So this beauty of Sanskrit language made it very easy, or not, I shouldn't say very easy, but it made it possible for the Hindus to write their literature either in stories, because in the stories you have connections, you have many characters that are linked with each other, and therefore it's so easy to preserve that knowledge. Or they wrote in poetry even their scientific literature. So for example, when Aryabhatta wrote or Brahmagupta wrote their books on astronomy and mathematics, they were written in poetry. And that's, I find it truly remarkable. Now, to give you an idea, just for the word zero, there are so many words that represent zero. So when you are translating something from Sanskrit to other language, this becomes a very difficult, challenging task. And only people who are well versed with that tradition are capable to translate it properly. A large number of people who do not understand the tradition, they make mistakes, and those mistakes are fairly common. Now, so this was the beauty, that everything was written in a poetry form, and even the mathematical and astronomical literature. And there is a very popular book on the history of mathematics or the history of arithmetic. It's written by Karpinski, and he studied the mathematical tradition of the Hindus. And then he wrote that Hindus had a great deal of time to spend on thinking up the words, because even the numbers were written in verse form, means they were written in using a coding system in words. So a large number of hymns in Sanskrit, they have two meanings: one, the literal meaning, and second, the scientific meaning. Let me talk a little bit about Al-Biruni. He came to India in 11th century. I'm sure you know the invasion of Mahmud Ghazni or Ghaznavi, who attacked India 16 times and went back. 17th time he succeeded and he captured the whole India. Now, and did massacres and destroyed the country, including Somnath temple. Now, with Mahmud Ghaznavi was a scholar named Al-Biruni. He came with Mahmud Ghaznavi, and he was based in Lahore, and he wrote a book called Al-Biruni's India. It is a very popular book and available in most libraries in the world. And the beauty of this book is it's a book written by a Muslim scholar who was with the invader, but his job was to document the sciences of the Hindus. And so let me share one quotation from that book. According to Al-Biruni, by composing their books in poetry, they intend to facilitate their learning by heart and to prevent people in all questions of science ever recurring to a written text. Means Hindus had no reason to read a book because they memorized it, and save in case of bare necessity, because Hindus believe that the mind of man sympathizes with everything where there is a symmetry and order, which is true. That's the reason. Now, this quotation continues, therefore, most Hindus are passionately fond of their verses and always desirous of reciting them. Even if they do not understand the meaning of words, and the audience will snap their fingers in token of joy and applause. This was the situation in India, where preserving knowledge was done so successfully that even people who do not understand it, they could memorize it. I find it truly remarkable, and something I think about, and I make a joke that maybe we should start teaching science on MTV and all these video channels that we have related to music. So this is what happened in India, and this is a Islamic account sharing that information. Now, another person, as I mentioned, that Sanskrit is a language which is not an easy language. It's the most scientific language. It is very, well-defined, but it has, its complexities, and it has its beauty, which when you translate it, it gets lost. I'm sure you do not know, or some of you may know, Kumarjiva. The reason he is not very popular in India is because he did not live in India, he lived in China. But it is because of Kumarjiva, China became a Buddhist country, and I think if you can organize a lecture on Kumarjiva, it would be a wonderful lecture, for your organization. And the reason I'm saying it is Richard B. Mather, this is the name of a person who teaches at University of Minnesota. So he is right there, and he is very knowledgeable about exchanges between India and China. So let me talk a little bit about Kumarjiva. His job was to translate Sanskrit books into Chinese. And he hated doing it because, according to him, the text lost its beauty. And he explained it in the following words, that it is something like chewing cooked rice and then feeding it to another person. Not only has it lost its flavor, but it will also make him want to throw up. So basically saying that translation, we are doing it, but we are losing the essence of the beauty of the original script. And that is the case. Now, I Singh is another Buddhist scholar who is Chinese, and he came to Nalanda and lived there for many years. And he has written, the Vedas have been handed down from mouth to mouth, not transcribed on paper or leaves. In every generation, there exists some intelligent Brahmins who can recite 100,000 verses. This is far from being myth. I myself have met such men. Think about it. He's saying 100,000 verses. Now, if you take 10 seconds to narrate a verse, which is by a very short time, then 100,000 words means you will speak non-stop for 11 days. That's a lot of memorization. However, Hindus did it, and because of that, when the libraries were burned, they were reproduced. And Hindus, they created a class of people among Brahmins. Their job was to memorize the sacred literature. So Vedi, Divedi, Trivedi, Chaturvedi means depending on whether they memorize one Veda or two Vedas and 3 or 4 Vedas, these surnames evolved, and these people were entrusted to preserve Vedas. And by the way, in 2003, UNESCO declared the oral tradition of the Hindus as masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity. So it is very well recognized by the world community. So that's the beauty, that's the reason, that's one of the reasons how Hindus were able to preserve their culture or their traditions. And I wanted, to talk about it, to share that. And now I'll come back to the topic. By the way, I'm a physicist. I'm no expert on ecology and plants and animals and human beings. But I have few ideas, and I thought I should share it with you. Now, first thing is, what is ecology? Well, it's a relation of organisms to one another and their relation to the physical surrounding. That's what we study. And we also study, the connection of the ecosystem, where the connection between human beings and the inanimate objects like water and so on. Now, talking about this, I want you to think about for a minute, and after the talk is over, perhaps think about it even more. I mean, just remember, when you were born, you were so tiny. And a little samosas and jalebis and rasmalais, you started growing. And in that process, from that small baby, you turn into a young lady or a man. What happened in that process? Think about it. What you have done is you are collecting atoms. Atoms that are eternal. They have been around for billions of years. So the atom that is a part of your body, maybe some time ago, it was a part of a snake or a cow or some other, organism. That's how we are connected. We are simply borrowing atoms for a short time. This is the reality of life, and we think we are special. Now, sometime when we collect for example, after we become adult, we realize that pizza tastes better with beer than with water. And then we collect even more atoms. And those atoms end up, getting stored in tummy or back. And that's, so basically all we are doing is we are collecting atoms. And one of these days we will discard atoms and those atoms will become a part of somebody else. That's the, a very scientific belief, scientific, reality, and nobody can dispute that. And as I mentioned, atoms are eternal. They have been around for, billions of years. Now, second thing. Now, when we are, when we are drinking water, that water is totally inert. It does not have any life. However, the moment we drink it, it becomes a part of ourselves and it becomes alive. That's how the, what we call the inanimate and animate object, that boundary is so fragile. The world is, the body is 70% water, and water, we consider it inert, but yet once it becomes a part of our body, that space becomes sacred to us and it becomes a system that is alive. Now, third thing that I want you to think about, we are all breathing. We inhale air and we exhale. When we exhale, what happened to that air? Think about it. Why do we say because of coronavirus, you should maintain distance about 6 to 8 feet? The reason is when we exhale air, it enters in the lung of the person next to us. And that distance, although we have set a limit of 6 to 8 feet, actually that limit is much longer. So when you are sitting in the plane, basically we are inhaling each other. This is how we are connected with each other. We do not much think about it, but that's the reality of life. Now, coming back to the Hindus. Hindus realized it, and therefore they made rules accordingly. And where nature was not a property owned by human, on the contrary, humans being were a part of nature. And as a result of that, plants and animals are worshipped in Hindu tradition. Tulsi, people, banyan tree, all these trees, they are worshipped. We worship, all life forms. I mean, just think about it, how sensitive we were to the environment. Then that Emperor Ashoka, he issued a decree against the demolition of trees in 2nd century BC. I mean, we are talking about that issue in the Western world now, when situation has become a major crisis. But Emperor Ashoka was way ahead of his time and issuing that decree in 2nd century BCE. Now, caring about animals, I'm pretty sure many of you must be aware of it, that in most Hindu families, when they cook a meal, they always leave some food for birds or dogs or cows and so on. It's a tradition where, I mean, I know my own father, he used to carry some flour with him so that anytime he saw a ant house, he left some food, that flour for ants to eat. So this is how Hindus are for the animal life. And it's something not new, it has been there. Even Atharvaveda, it talks about, in the book 12, there is a whole chapter about earth, where earth is worshipped as a goddess. It is personified as Bharat Mata, Mother India. So that concept is nothing new. It has been there for a very, very long time. There are prayers in Atharvavedas, and in those prayers, we are asking for the Mother Earth to support people of all races and nations, and we are praying her to remain fertile, arable, and nourisher of all. And that's what we thought about many thousand years, when food was not even an issue. I mean, in 2000 years ago, Earth was very easily capable of feeding the whole population. So also, there is a prayer basically saying Mother Earth that it should provide us medicine and medicinal plant. So we knew the therapeutic property of plants and trees, and that takes me to the next level of this ecology, trees. So let me discuss a little bit about trees. By the way, when you think about trees, think trees and plants as chemical factories that are much better than what human beings can do. That's the reality. Even today, a large number of medicine are basically extract from some plants, like aspirin, which we love to take, is basically coming out from willow tree. I'm pretty sure there are plenty of willow trees in Minnesota. The leaves of those trees, that's what aspirin is, and so on. So plants are chemical factories. Think of trees as chemical factories. Then think of trees as something that will provide us food. And third thing, that forest they are the lungs of planet. Basically, if Amazon is gone, there will go the air quality for the whole planet Earth. So preserving Amazon, preserving these forests, preserving these trees, it is essential for our survival, and the ancient Hindus knew it and knew it well. In fact, in Padma Purana, it tells us that planting tree is the simplest way to achieve moksha. So planting tree was considered to be a holy act. This is something thousands of years ago, and I find it remarkable. Now, I'm going to share a few quotations from Upanishads and Mahabharata and some other texts, and that will tell us the Hindus' knowledge about the connection between plants, animals, and human beings. So like, for example, this Vrihad Aranka Upanishads, it tells us that a man is like a mighty tree. Hair is like leaves, blood is like sap, and just like there is a flow of blood, there is a, when you strike a tree, sap will flow. Flesh is like inner bark, and so on. So the comparison of, basically they are saying that this system that human beings have, it is quite similar to the system that trees have. Now, this is something quite important, and if there is a biologist here, I think in the audience, I hope they find it remarkable. In Mahabharata, in Shanti Parva, there is a discourse between two monks, Bhrigu and Bhardwaj. Bhrigu had a question, and he asked Bhardwaj to answer it. So the question of Bhrigu was that plants and animals are guided by the same primal elements, Panchabhuta, which I'll explain it in a minute. But I don't see that in plants. He says that plants do not have body heat, they do not move, they remain in one place, and plants cannot hear, they cannot see, they cannot smell, they cannot eat. So, to consider that they are guided by these five primal elements, it doesn't make sense. By the five primal elements are Prithvi, which is earth, water, fire, air, and space. This was the very first periodic table that was created by human being, that everything that we have in this universe is made up of these five elements. And it was pretty successful because it survived for thousands of years. And it was Robert Boyle, a British chemist, who improved it and said, okay, it's not these five elements, but it is 32. So Robert Boyle went from these five elements to 32. And today, I don't even know how many we have, but I think we have close to 115 elements in the periodic table. So this was the question that was raised by Bhrigu, and the answer is simply, amazing. So the next 2 or 3 slides are basically the answer that Bhardwaj gave, and his answer was as follows. He's saying, yes, trees are fixed, but they have space in it. So they fulfill one of the five elements. They have body heat. that is responsible for the dropping of flower, fruit, bark, and leaves. So he's saying that plants have body heat. They get sick, and there is an effect of wind, fire, lightning, and therefore they have to have a sense of hearing. Plants always follow light, so therefore they must have vision. Now, just like human beings, plant fall sick, and when they fall sick, you can fumigate, means you can give them medicine and they can cure. That means they breathe, they have smell, they eat, they drink water from their roots, and if the water is contaminated, it will give disease to the plant. That means they have perception of taste. They suck water through a tube, through their roots, and they can produce new shoots, and they digest food. They even preserve food for future. So they store food just like human being. I'm sure if you have any background in medicine or in biology, you know that the main role of fat is to store energy for ourselves. So fat is not bad for us. The problem is too much of it is a problem. And the body tendency is to store fat, because most of our history of human being, we had to climb on a tree or chase an animal to eat food. Now we jump in our car and there is a McDonald's. So, but the body tendency, the genes have still, they have a tendency to store that energy. And so it is creating a lot more problems for us. But this knowledge is, pretty ancient, and I find it truly remarkable. Now, there is another in Chandogya Upanishad, there is a statement which basically says that trees are like human beings. And I find it really remarkable. Now, there is a legend of Jivaka. Jivaka is the name of a person who was studying under Atreya, who, by the way, was a teacher in Takshila, which is right now a part of Pakistan. And one day, Jivaka decided that maybe he should start his own practice. So he went to his teacher, Atreya, and said that, please give me blessing. I want to start my own practice. And so Atreya said, okay, I will give you, but just like, today, he had to go through an exam. So Atreya asked him that, okay, I want you to go around the monastery and look for a plant that has no medicinal value. So that was the job he assigned to Jivaka. And Jivaka went around the ashram, and he could not find a plant that has no medicinal value. So he came back somewhat dejected and told Atreya that he could not find a plant. And Atreya was pleased, and he said, now that means you're good enough to start your own practice. That's how good Hindus were in medicine, and they studied the plant life so much. Now, talking of that, by the way, when J.C. Bose, who was a physicist, he had no training in biology, But as a child, when he was growing up, his mother used to say that plants have life. They are like human being. And in fact, I remember one quote that she used to tell him, that don't bother plants in nighttime. By the way, this is not very well documented. So I'm saying it based on what I have heard. It may or may not be true. But, that he learned it from the ancient Hindu literature, there is no question about that. So he decided that he is going to investigate plant life, although he had no training in biology. And he came up with a Crescograph where he could study the effect of fertilizer and food and electric current and so on. Basically, not only plants have life, they have a nervous system, and they basically act like a human being. So in Scientific American in 1915, this article was published in there, and this Crescograph, according to Scientific American, is like Aladdin's lamp, means it had so much magical power. And a Crescograph is basically a device to measure growth in plants. And it was with this, he was able to experiment with the effect of temperature, chemical, and so on. By the way, talking of J.C. Bose, we say that telegraph or the radio communication was invented by Marconi, and the Italian inventor. Actually, it was invented by J.C. Bose, but he was almost like a monk, and he decided not to patent it. And he shared that information with Marconi when he was in London. And then he left for India, and that's how Marconi became famous. And today, IEEE, I think some 10, 15 years ago, finally admitted, I think, that yes, it was J.C. Bose. Now, in Charak Samhita, which is a holy book, not a holy book, but a book of medicine, a very popular book of medicine among the Hindus, it says that please contact tribal people to learn about herbs. How come tribal people know what a university graduate doesn't know? And that's something we should think about. By the tribal people, they don't go to school, but they observe animal life. And by observing animals, you can learn a lot. And this is what happens. So this is something that was, even in Atharvaveda, it says that, look for the herbal remedies from snakes, swans, and cows and sheep. Now, talking of, sacredness of plants and animals, swans are associated with the Saraswati, mice are associated with the Ganesha, snakes with Lord Shiva, lions with Durga. So all these gods and goddesses, they were always associated with some animal, and that the purpose was to provide sanctity to animal life. And that's what happened. Now, not only this, the gender issue, which is a very popular issue around the world. In Hindu religion, different god and goddesses, they have attributes. Like there is a goddess of money, that's Lakshmi. We have a goddess of wisdom, that's Saraswati. Is there a male counterpart? No, there is no god of money. There is no god of wisdom. Both portfolios, money and wisdom, have gone to the female gender. I hope you understand the status of females in Hindu tradition. And anybody who, says that females are, suppressed, they don't understand the Hindu traditions. Another, I'm going to give you an example of the status of female. The whole Ramayana started because Ravan kidnapped Sita. And Lord Rama, he did everything to protect, to get his wife back. That's what happened. Same thing, the whole Mahabharata started because Draupadi was insulted. So these gender issues, they are, there is a equality of gender, something a large number of people in the Western world particularly, they don't understand and appreciate it. When people get married, we walk around fire 7 times, and 3.5 times is the male who will lead, and 3.5 round is the female that will lead. So this is basically the defining the equality of status between male and female. Now, talking of disease, just like Adam is the first human being in the Christian and Islamic tradition, the same way in Hindu tradition, it is Manu, and disease is as old as the human beings, always, and therefore they had to come up with a system, and that system was Ayurveda, where Ayur means span of life and Veda means knowledge or wisdom. And so Ayurveda basically means is a life science that is for the well-being of body and mind. Now, there is something about this, as I mentioned, that this science has been there forever, and it is considered to be the most meritorious science, and that Ayurveda, it has been there forever, and it is the first systematic comprehension. That's basically when we say it has a beginning. And I just want to talk a little bit about this slide, that Charak Samhita was written by organizing a symposium of 53 noted scholars on medicine. So, in thousands of years ago, these kind of symposium were common, and it was a practice. And in the previous lecture, I talked about that when you are sharing, then problems are bound to happen, and differences are bound to happen, and they defined rules how to interact in a group. So in this book, in Charak Samhita, one can read it, and I find it truly, truly remarkable how the rules are defined, how to respect or interact with another scholar. Now, I'm going to skip a few. By the way, this was the expectation in Hindu traditions, that you should live up to at least 100 years actively. While doing deeds, you must desire to live for 100 years. By the way, I do not know if you are aware of the average life in Rome or in Greece or in Egypt. And when you compare it with the Hindus, I find it remarkable. The average age in Egypt was in 30s at this time. So, and the same thing in Rig Veda, where throughout in Hindu literature, they say that you must aspire to live actively for 100 years at least. So this was the expectancy, and they created, things to take care of it. For example, the role of human being, the mindset in the health of human being. See, when we describe a person, we say, oh, the person has good achar vichar. Achar means the behavior, what he eats, or the way he thinks, and vichar is basically the thought process. So the connection of mind and the well-being of physical body, it was realized long ago in the Hindu tradition, and they told us not only to eat well, but to even think well. This mindset plays a very important role in the well-being of human being. So happiness, it is a necessity. If you want to live long, if you want to live happily, if you want to live without disease, happiness is not a choice, it's a necessity. And that was defined so long ago in Hindu tradition. And the impact of improper diet, that was also well defined in, for example, in Vaisheshika Sutra. When we write about the history of hospitals in the Western books, we say that the system of hospitals is started in the Islamic world in 9th century in Baghdad. That's where the concept of hospital started. And from there, from Baghdad, it went to Europe. This is what is written. Now, when I'm talking about Charak Samhita, I'm talking about the before Christian era. So let me explain it to you how wrong this narrative is. However, people who write it, they can control the narrative. And so I would love to see, more articles on this where we can share this knowledge with the rest of the world. When Charaka wrote that book, he even explained how the hospital should be designed and how the rooms should be designed in that hospital. So he shared that there should be good ventilation. There should be no intense glare of sunlight. No smoke, water should not enter in the room. There should not be any dust. There should be no unpleasant sound, touch, or view, or taste, or smell. Expert chefs should be associated with the hospital. Servants should be there, nurses should be there, pharmacists should be there, doctors should be there. There should be birds, deers, just singers, musicians. This is how well developed the concept of hospital was in India in BC period. Now, Charak also is suggesting make sure that you have enough drugs. So store drugs. This is a problem, with coronavirus. We recently there was a shortage of drugs. And so this is something they thought about even in the BC period. Now, Ashoka, who was an emperor in the BC period, in his one of the edict, he has written that there should be separate hospitals for human beings and animals. So think about it, that not only in India in BC period we knew about the concept of hospital, we were making separate hospitals for human beings and animals. Now, Fayan, he is a traveler, scholar who came from China, and he came to Nalanda. And when he came to Nalanda, he has written about the city, today we call it Patna, where they built a hospital for poor of all countries. Remember, not for that kingdom, but for all kingdoms. People who are destitute, cripples, and diseased, they could come to that hospital, and every kind of requisite help were given to them. They were provided food, drink, medicine, and and they could stay there for free. And when they were cured, they could leave. So this hospital system was well developed in India in BC period, and something for some reason, it's not a common knowledge. I think I should stop, because otherwise, my time is almost up. Thank you so much for your patient listening, and I would be happy to answer any question that you may have.
This is Gordon. I have a question about equality of women and men. I heard someplace that Hindu concept is not equality, it is complementarity.
Yes.
That what is shown as Ardhanarishwar. So in Hindu concept, you should not even talk about equality, because no two things are equal. But one is very much it's a complementarity, and that's what we should be emphasized, not equality.
Yes.
Any comment?
Yeah, I agree with you. The reason I have used the term equality is because that's what the common word that is commonly used in the Western world. And that is the reason. But you are correct. They are two different things. So they are not equal. But when I'm talking about the status, there is a equality there. So I agree with you.
So I have a question as well, somewhat parallel. I was thinking back to the story about the aspiring physician who first had to recognize that all plants have healing properties, but there are also plants that are highly poisonous. And you, in fact, don't just go around taking any plant because it can make you sick or even kill you. And I was wondering whether there is some acknowledgement of that property of plants in a teaching story like the one that you told us.
That is, I'm glad that you asked me this question, because now I can elaborate that. If you read Kautilya Arthashastra, he has written recipes where plant is used as poison. So they have studied that aspect also. Talking of that, even poison can be used as medicine in many diseases. So, the issue is whether you know the proper use of that plant extract in a particular situation. That's what will decide whether it's a poison or, it's a nectar. The Hindus, they studied that and they were good at it. So even the negative, aspect of plants is very well defined.
If you let me, I will ask one more question.
Please.
I was interested in that conversation in the Mahabharata about the similarities between human beings and trees. Mm-hmm. And one thing that seemed very strange to me is some of the inferences that were drawn. So, for example, if I remember correctly, there was a statement that trees can draw up unwanted materials or diseases from the ground. Therefore, it said, they must have taste, or they do have taste. And went through all of the senses in that way. The one that I think a modern biologist would accept is vision, in quotes, because in the sense that plants definitely respond to light. But when it comes to, and smell, because they respond to airborne chemicals. But when it comes to taste or perhaps even touch, no, that's true. Touch is okay. But what about taste? That seemed like a very strange one to me.
Basically, when they are saying, about taste, they are mentioning that they eat, so that just like human beings eat, the same way plants are eating.
Yes, so they're taking nutrition from the soil in that sense. Right. Okay. Yeah. But if one takes the translation literally, then it attributes experiences to trees, right? Taste and smell and vision, those are all subjective experiences. And you probably know that there is an ongoing debate in the world of biology about using terminology like that. And some people feel that it's a good thing because it expands our thinking about what plants may be capable of, and others say it's actually inappropriate because it is hiding the fact that plants work so very differently from animals that we are actually doing an injustice to plants if we anthropomorphize them too much.
Yeah, I don't deal with that question in physics, So basically, I have shared what these ancient people did and how much it is matching. By the even today, when we are teaching dissection, to medical students, they are not, dissecting human beings. They are first dissecting plants. That's how we are the reason, because of the similarity. So first you go on plants, and then you go on animals, and then you go on human beings. That's the process, that I have been told that, commonly practiced. This connection of plant life and human life, that is there from the very ancient period. And there is a dependence, like for example, this exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen. So they have, complementary roles there.
I'd like to make a comment. Listening to this conversation about plants and human beings, I'd like to suggest fantastic research and a recent book in the last 4 or 5 years
by a German scientist. And the English translation is called The Secret Life of Trees. Not only do the plants and trees have these sort of physical attributes of human beings, but they also have a mental state. They, in fact, also live as a community. They communicate with their neighbors, and they warn them when a certain danger comes. So really, one of the things I'd like to bring out in listening to this, and I'm very happy to have heard this, I'm also a physicist, so that's a nice commonality. But the thing is that I've always felt that knowledge is, in a way, progresses as we grow and we understand and we absorb what has been done in the past. So I would like us to kind of honor the amazing stuff that we have come to know now and kind of correlate with our ancient past, not so much as a point of such pride that we forget how things are deteriorating these days, especially in India in so many ways. So I'd like to kind of make that a sort of a point where we have some humility about how can we make life better now, especially if we had such a wonderful sense about it in the past. Anyway, thank you so much again.
By the way, thank you so much for sharing your comment, but I would like to share something. If you really care for your present, you should understand, you should know their past, because that only will dictate where will you be going. You will know that. So you simply cannot ignore history, number one. Number two, it is so much easier to unite people if there is a good story to share. That's the reason, I said that, yes, I'm guilty of talking about the good things in Hindu culture. That's what I'm talking about. And I don't feel guilty about it. Now, third thing is, why should we know about history? Because we care for present. Past is gone. We can never recapture it. Future is, we do not know, is uncertain. So the only thing is right now, that's the reality. I completely agree with it. But there, if we remain fragmented and so on, we will never be able to recapture that bright vision that we had. I mean, the Indian GDP was 33% of the whole world's GDP at one time. Today, when we got independence, it was 2%. And today, it is, I think, close to 5 or 7%. Now, you are at 5%. If you know that once you had 33% at one time, you have a desire to reach, to recapture that bright vision. Their history has a role to play, and you should not ignore it. Usually people who, there is a very famous saying that if you ignore history, you are bound to make mistakes again and again. So only in that context, the reason I'm talking about history is because I'm focused on right now. So that's the only reason I'm talking about it. Now, when I'm giving a 1 hour lecture, I cannot solve all world's problems. So I have to focus on something, and that focus is ancient Hindu science. That's what I'm talking about.
No, I thank you very much. I said what I said, not in the correct way. What I meant to say was that I appreciated very much the knowledge and the history and the stories you told us. And in a way, I was asking you a question as to how we can take that knowledge and our understanding of our past, and how could we transform it to make life better now. And you answered that, in your reply. So I thank you. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much for asking the question. And like I said, if you want to flourish, if you want to prosper, if you want to become better, their mindset has a very important role to play. Do you want to survive in your life, or do you want to excel in your life? That depends on the kind of mindset you have. And there, the past examples play an important role. And that's all I was doing. And thank you for asking this question.
I have a couple of comments or questions. One is about whether the plants have taste. But when you look at the other way around, each plant takes different types of minerals because you eat different plants for different things. So they should have some way of discrimination of which minerals to take. So they have taste in some way or other.
That's a very good point. You have mentioned that, they are selective and therefore they have taste. And I think I would love to hear, Professor John Pelker's comment on that, because he's the one who said that, plants don't have any taste.
Well, I think the question arises in relation to experience. There's no doubt that plants respond to factors in their environment. And we are learning more and more about that. When I first started at the University of Washington, it was a new finding that trees communicate with each other by chemicals over long distances, so that they issue warnings. If one tree is attacked by an insect, it will release chemicals. Other trees will pick it up and gear up their anti-insect defenses. Right? That was 40 or so, 50 years ago. That was a new finding, and we are accumulating many findings of this kind. The conversation in biology has not been about that. It has been about using a human-based language to describe these amazing capabilities that plants have. And is that wise, or is that misleading? And there's debate about this. There was a Society for Plant Neuroscience. After some years, they changed their name. And I don't quite remember what the new name is, but they stepped away from neuroscience because of the implication of more similarity, more detailed similarity between plants and animals than actually exists. And if you have that mindset, then you look at plants in a way that may not recognize their special nature, the ways in which they are different from animals. If you use a terminology that pushes the similarities too much. So that is the area of discussion, not that there are functional similarities. I think there's broad agreement on that among biologists today. It is, what is the best way to describe both the similarities and the differences? It's a little bit like the question of equality and complementarity, right? Single phenomenon, but depending on which word you use, you think about it in a different way.
Yes, I agree with you. By the talking of plants communicating, the book that you have, Sciences of the Ancient Hindus, I have talked about it.
No kidding.
That plants even communicate with each other. And I think I have provided some citations there also.
Excellent. Thank you.
And by the way, there is something, the person who talked about that I'm talking the positive things about, Hindu culture, and I have agreed with it, and, and I don't feel guilty about it. I not only with the religion, and I'm a Hindu, when I go to visit my friends and they ask me, how's your daughter doing? Don't open all the bad things about my daughter. I say good things about her. So I do the same thing there too. And I wonder if, the person who was complaining about it, if that's what he does when somebody is asking how the family is doing, do they open the whole, stories how bad the children are? I doubt it, So this is how, it's the perspective. I'm trying to show how good that culture was at one time by talking is strengths, and that's all I was doing.
One comment you mentioned about being, too much proud about about your the old knowledge and all that. But when you think about the Hindu ethos, the people who knew were very humble. They were not beating their, breast saying, "I know this." Okay, they never did that.
Yeah,
and of course, the teachers always selected the students, and they selected for their the attitude and mentality as much as their brain. That's what I hear when I or read when I read old books.
Yeah, and you are absolutely right. That's how it was. There are two things. One, you take pride in, and pride may not be the right word, in what your accomplishments are, but you do not brag about it. So bragging can be labeled as something, that's not humble. But taking pride in, feeling good about your own existence, I don't think that is a bad thing. In fact, to do that is so much easier to unite people. And that's all I meant. But again, if you are speaking truth, if you are defining truth, and if you are saying that hospitals, the concept of hospital was much more ancient than 9th century, I don't think you are bragging about it. You are in the word what the truth is, and that's where it is, and wherever it may lead us.
Let me say, it's not what you said, but it's what sometimes you hear in the media from various parts, that people are too much into the pride part, not the knowledge part, if you want to call it. That's where I am.
Yes, I agree with you. In fact, I can tell you another thing that is happening. When we talk about religion, we think about the image we propagate is we are talking about peace, we are talking about tranquility, and so on. But the truth is there are more wars on the name of religion than on anything else in the human history. Part of religion we never talk about, and the reason why it is happening because we take false pride. And that is why it has happened in human history. So following the truth, that is the way to go. And we must remain humble. I completely agree with you. But we must stick to the truth also. And we should not ignore that either.
Thank you, Alokji.
By the way, thank you so much. I really appreciate for your patient listening. And thank you so much for providing your input to me. It's such a pleasure to get to know you. I hope someday, if the biologists start doing their job, we'll have a solution for this coronavirus soon. And once that problem is resolved, I would love to come to Minnesota and hear you, and your suggestions and complaints and, your ideas. But till then, this is the best way I can interact with all of you. again, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to get to know all of you. I think I have gained something out of this experience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you
Yes.
for coming.